Her father put a price tag sign around her neck. The cowboy who bought her never said a word. The wind rolled across the plains like a ghost in mourning, carrying with it the dust of dead crops and dying dreams. The sun had only just begun to climb the sky, casting long, sorrowful shadows over the town of Dry Creek, a town that had once dreamed of railroads and prosperity, now little more than splinters and whispers. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer echoed faintly in the distance, but it was drowned out by a more unsettling sound, the low murmur of a gathered crowd, hushed like the moments before a hanging dot. Amelia Wright stood barefoot on the wooden platform. Her father had built with shaking hands. Her dress, once pale blue, was now the color of the earth stained by weeks of drought and labor. Her wrists were not bound, yet she felt as if shackles dug into her skin. The sign that hung from a thin piece of rawhide around her neck was crude, $200 or best offer. Black letters, hastily carved by knife, swayed slightly in the morning breeze. Her lips were dry. Her eyes were not. Beside her stood her father, Gerald Wright, gaunt and silent. His once proud frame had withered with the land. The war had taken his left leg. The drought took the rest. He could barely look at her as the townsfolk circled like vultures. He spoke in a voice made of gravel and guilt. She's a hard worker. Knows how to ride, cook, sew. She'll do whatever's asked. His words floated above her like smoke from a funeral pyre. Amelia didn't flinch, didn't cry. She only stared at the horizon, at the hills that looked like the backs of sleeping beasts. Somewhere beyond them was a place where girls weren't sold like cattle. Somewhere beyond them was air that didn't taste of rust and failure. A man snorted in laughter. Hell, I've seen better-looking fillies with fewer teeth. A woman muttered, God forgive you, Gerald. That's your own blood up there. But no one stopped it. Amelia remembered the night before, when her father came to her with the sign. He hadn't said a word then either, just laid it on her bed like a death sentence. She had stared at it for what felt like hours, waiting for him. To take it back, to fall to his knees and weep for what he was about to do. But he didn't. He just walked away, cane tapping like a metronome of doom. She'd tied it around her own neck. The platform creaked as a man stepped closer, lifting her chin with a calloused finger. She stared him down, jaw set. What's wrong? With her? Can she speak? Gerald answered. She can. She just chooses not to. She got a name? Amelia. The man's lips twisted into a grin. Well, Amelia, you come with a warranty? There was a flicker of movement at the edge of the crowd. A horse, black as coal and still as stone, stood by the trough. Its rider dismounted slowly, a long coat trailing like shadow. His hat cast his face in darkness, but his presence was undeniable. The murmurs faded as he stepped forward. He didn't speak. He didn't even make eye contact. He held up a coin purse and dropped it in the dirt. $2.50, Gerald said quickly. Cash. The man gave no reaction, just turned and walked. Back to his horse. Amelia stood frozen. Her father didn't even look at her as he pocketed the money. She climbed down from the platform without instruction, feet touching the dry ground like it might open up and swallow her whole. She followed the silent man across the street. No one stopped her. No one said goodbye. The ride began at midday. The horse, dark and heavy-hoofed, moved like it knew where to go without guidance. Amelia sat behind the man, her arms lightly wrapped around his waist, though the gap between them felt miles wide. She didn't ask questions. He didn't offer answers. For hours they traveled in silence, the world around them changing from dust to rock to the occasional grove of sun-bleached trees. Each mile put more distance between her and the man who sold her, but not enough to mute the echo of betrayal. At sundown, they reached a small ridge where the land opened into a shallow valley. There, under a crescent moon, the man finally dismounted. He set up a modest camp with practiced movements, lit a small fire, and sat down without a word. Amelia remained on the horse, unsure. He didn't look up, didn't beckon her, just tossed. A piece of jerky near the fire. She waited Dot, and then slowly she slid down and walked to the fire. The sign still around her neck. Dot, as the flames crackled, she sat across from him. He removed his hat. His face was lean and wind-carved, with a day's worth of stubble and eyes that had seen too much. He looked at her, not like a man looks at property, not even like a man looks at another person. More like he was seeing her, as one would see a distant storm quiet, powerful and dangerous. Still, he didn't speak. Dot. She tore off the sign and dropped it into the fire. It curled and blackened instantly. Dot. He watched. That night, sleep didn't come easy. She lay wrapped in a blanket under a sky full of stars, the man a few feet away, his back to her. His hand rested on the butt of a revolver even as he slept. She stared at the fire's last embers and thought about what kind of man buys a girl and never utters a word. The next day, they rode again. The land became more rugged, hills sharp as broken bones, ravines like the scars of giants. She didn't ask where they were going. She wasn't sure it mattered. Part of her wondered if he was taking her to another man, someone who paid more, someone worse. But part of her hoped, though she hated herself for it, that he send single quotes tea. Late in the afternoon, they stopped by a stream. As she knelt to drink, she caught her reflection, dust-streaked cheeks, sunburned nose, eyes like cold steel. She didn't look like the girl who had once danced barefoot in the rain or sang lullabies to her baby brother. That girl had died somewhere between the platform and this creek. The man handed her a canteen. Their fingers brushed. She flinched, then steadied herself. He didn't notice or pretended not to. Dot. Suddenly, a sound, dry branches cracking. She turned. He stood, hand already on his gun. Out of the brush came a coyote, ribs jutting from starvation. It paused, eyes gleaming, and snarled. The man didn't shoot. Instead, he stepped forward and yelled, sharp and guttural. The coyote backed away, growled once more, and vanished into the trees. He turned to her. For the first time, he spoke. Don't waste bullets. His voice was rough, like it hadn't been used in weeks. Maybe longer. But it wasn't cruel, just tired. Amelia stared at him. You have a name? She asked, softly. He considered for a long moment. Boom. That was all. The fire that night was bigger. She shared half of her biscuit with him without thinking. He gave her an extra blanket. In the silence that followed, something shifted. Not warmth, not friendship, but something more valuable out here, trust. Past she began to understand him not through words, but through action. How he always rode with one eye on the horizon. How he gave her the better portion of food without comment. How he always let her mount first. When a dust storm caught them near a dried-out canyon, he pulled her beneath a ledge and shielded her with his coat, never once touching her skin. When they found a trapper shack, and the owner eyed her too. Long, Boone stood so still, the man apologized before anyone spoke a word. In every moment, he became something unexpected. Not a savior, not a captor, something in between. A witness to her transformation. One night, by the fire, she told him about her brother, Samuel, how he died coughing blood because there was no doctor for miles. Boone didn't respond. But the next morning, he handed her a crude wooden charm, carved into the shape of a bird. He never explained where he got it. They traveled north. The land became greener. And yet, something inside her was still brittle. Every kindness he showed her was a weight on her chest, because she didn't know what it meant. What he wanted in return. It wasn't until they reached a crossroads, a real one. marked by weather-worn signs that he stopped riding. He turned. To her, "You can go east. Town's 2 days from here. Safe, mostly, or stay." "I'm headed west." The decision hit her like a storm dot. She looked east. Thought of towns, law, maybe a life, then west. Open land. Danger. Him dot. She didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was steady. "I don't owe you anything." "No." He said, "And you don't own me." "No." She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. "I'll go west." They didn't smile. They didn't shake hands. But when they rode again, they rode side by side, Dot, and for the first time, the wind didn't taste like death, Dot. It tasted like something new. The wilderness was not kind. It didn't smile at strangers or welcome them with softness. It breathed down their necks, watched them from the trees, and tested them with every rise in the terrain. Amelia had always imagined the frontier as a place of endless sky and promise. But now, moving deeper into the wild with Boone, she saw it for what it truly was, a place where silence had teeth, and survival was earned in bruises and blisters. They rode through thick pines where the light filtered like broken glass through the branches. Birds cried overhead, sharp and urgent. The trail beneath Boone's horse was barely more than a memory of passage, a flattened ribbon through undergrowth and stone. Amelia's thighs ached from the saddle, her hands rubbed raw from gripping. Leather reins, but she didn't complain. She was learning the quiet language of endurance. Boone spoke it fluently. He said little as they traveled, offering brief nods or the occasional gesture. When they passed a stream, he filled her canteen without asking. When the wind changed direction, he paused to listen, eyes narrowed as if reading something she couldn't see. She watched him closely, not with suspicion anymore, but with growing curiosity. Boone wasn't just a man used to the land. He was part of it. One evening, after days of steady travel, the weather shifted. Clouds rolled in heavy and mean, the color of old bruises. Boone scanned the sky and led them off the trail, deeper into a gorge carved by years of rain and time. They found shelter beneath an outcropping of rock, just as the storm broke overhead. The wind howled like a wounded animal, and rain fell in sheets so thick it blurred the world. Under the ledge, Boone built a fire with dry moss and flint, shielding it with his body until it took. Amelia huddled near it, drenched and shivering. She could feel her heartbeat in her teeth. Boone pulled a rough wool blanket from his pack and handed it to her. She took it without thanks, but wrapped it tight. When the fire began to crackle with life, he spoke, barely above the storm. "Lightning strikes close in these parts. Keep low." She nodded, grateful for the warning. The storm raged for hours. Thunder cracked like musket fire. Amelia tried to sleep, but every bolt lit the canyon like daylight, casting shadows that twisted and danced. She glanced at Boone. He sat with his back to the wall, one knee up, rifle resting in his arms. He didn't close his eyes. "You never sleep?" she asked, surprising herself. "I sleep when it's quiet." They fell into silence again. But something shifted between them, something beyond necessity. Amelia realized Boone didn't just guard the trail. He guarded her, and it wasn't about payment or possession. It was something older, something heavier. The next morning, the land sparkled with rain. The trees dripped and the path glistened, but the danger hadn't passed. Their horses moved slower through the mud, hooves sinking with every step. Boone rode ahead, scanning the forest's edge, until suddenly he raised a hand. Amelia stopped. He pointed, not with his finger, but with his chin. Across the path, paw prints large, fresh, pressed deep into the wet earth. Boone knelt beside them and traced a line through the print with his finger. "Cougar," he said. Amelia's stomach clenched. Boone looked around slowly, then stood and unholstered his sidearm. His eyes met hers. Stay close. For the next hour, they rode with rifles ready and ears sharpened. Every rustle in the underbrush made Amelia flinch. She imagined golden eyes watching from the trees, muscles coiled and hungry. At one point, they came upon a half-eaten deer carcass, ribs stripped clean and flies thick in the air. Boone inspected it briefly. Fresh, he murmured. They didn't linger by dusk. They reached a narrow clearing, and Boone signaled they'd stop. The terrain was steep on all sides defensible. He set up camp methodically, checking for tracks, placing stones in a half circle to contain the fire. Amelia helped gather kindling without being asked. As they ate quietly, the tension began to ebb. The cougar hadn't followed. Or if it had lost interest. Amelia watched Boone as he chewed in thoughtful silence, eyes scanning the darkening woods. There was a story behind those eyes. 1,000, maybe. But he carried them like a man carries a scar, not hidden, not flaunted. She finally asked, "Why'd you buy me?" Boone didn't flinch, didn't look away. He finished chewing, swallowed, and replied with even calm, "Because no one else should have." His answer sat in the air, heavy as thunder. Amelia didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. And somehow that was enough. That night she dreamed of wolves. Not of being hunted, but of running with them free, wild, unafraid. Over the next days, the terrain grew harsher. The forest gave way to dry cliffs and sun-bleached stone. Water became scarce. Boone rationed it without complaint, sometimes giving her the last mouthful. They passed a ghost town where the wind moved through hollow buildings like whispers of the dead. Amelia found a rusted child's toy half buried in sand, a tin horse with one missing leg. She didn't pick it up. It was during a climb through a narrow canyon that they heard the voices. Male, laughing rough. Boone stopped and motioned her down. They dismounted and led the horses behind a ridge. From above, they saw them 3 men on horses, dusty and armed, camped near a creek. One cleaned a rifle. Another drank from a jug. The third was pacing. Boone's eyes narrowed. Outlaws? Worse, he said. Bounty boys. Amelia's breath caught. She remembered what she still looked like to the world, a girl who'd been sold, a girl someone might think could still be claimed. Boone whispered, "We go wide. No fire tonight." They made a slow arc around the camp, staying low, hooves muffled by dry grass. It took hours. Twilight deepened into night before. They finally stopped. As Amelia prepared to sleep, she noticed Boone hadn't eaten. "You hungry?" "Not tonight." She watched him, the lines of his face deepened by fatigue. And for the first time, she understood just how much he carried for both of them. She took her last piece of bread and split it in half. Wordlessly, she handed it to him. He accepted it with a nod, but no smile. He didn't need to. In the days that followed, the silence between them became something else, companionable, almost sacred. They moved in rhythm. She learned his patterns, began to predict them. She found wild berries before he pointed them out. She read the sky and guessed when they'd make camp. Then came the ambush. It happened just after sunrise, when the air was still cool and golden. They were crossing a ridge when the crack of a rifle shattered the peace. Boone was thrown from his horse, hitting the dirt with a hard thud. Amelia screamed and dove behind a rock. Her heart thundered in her ears. 3 men emerged from the trees. "Not bounty hunters, worse bandits. Easy now," one said. "We don't want to hurt the girl." Another laughed. "Well, not yet." Amelia's eyes darted to Boone. He lay motionless, blood at his temple. Her body moved before her mind. Could stop it? She scrambled across the rocks, reached for his pistol, her hands shaking violently. They saw her. "Drop it, sweetheart." She didn't. She raised the revolver with both hands, aimed without breathing. A gunshot rang out, not hers. One bandit fell. A second shouted and turned. Boone was on his feet, bloodied but awake, his rifle steady. The second man dropped before he could fire. The third ran. Boone didn't pursue. He staggered, leaning on his rifle. Amelia rushed to him. "You're bleeding." He wiped his brow, wincing. "Just a cut." She helped him sit. They tended the wound with whiskey and cloth. As she pressed the bandage to his head, he looked. At her. "You shoot?" "No." "But you didn't run." She met his gaze. "Neither did you." They left the bodies behind. The next day, they reached a hilltop where the world spread wide before them, green fields, rivers, a town in the distance, civilization, safety. Boone slowed his horse. "That's the edge," he said. "Could stop." Here, Amelia studied the town. It looked peaceful, clean, but it felt small now, like it could never hold the things she had learned. She turned to Boone. "What about you?" He didn't answer right away. "I keep going." She nodded. "And I do too." They rode on, the town fading behind them like a story they'd already outgrown. Ahead, the land waited wild, uncertain, unforgiving. But this time, she wasn't afraid. The wind howled low through the ravine like an omen, rustling the sparse grass that clung to the rocks. Boone stood at the edge of the ridge, his coat pulled tight against the morning chill. Below, a smoke trail rose from a camp nestled in the Yow, crook of the valley. From this distance, the people looked like ants' figures moving between tents, herding horses, building fires. But even at a glance, Boone could tell something wasn't right. Too many rifles, too much movement, and none of it casual. Amelia stood beside him, her eyes narrowed. She could feel it too. There was a tension in the air, like a held breath waiting to break. "They're watching for someone," she said. Boone nodded once. "They expect trouble." "Is it us?" "They don't know it yet," he said. They crouched low as Boone drew a rough sketch in the dirt, carving out the slope, the ledge, the position of the camp. His movements were quiet, methodical. Amelia watched closely. This wasn't just a man surviving anymore. This was a man preparing for something final. "Who are they?" she asked. Boone didn't answer right away. He traced a line through the center of the camp and marked 3 X's. Militia remnants. Outlaws, really. Used to ride for justice now. They ride for themselves. They take what they want, people, land, girls like you. Amelia stared at the drawing, her stomach twisting. "They're holding people?" Boone looked at her, his expression unreadable. 3 men I knew went missing. Near here. A family from Hollow Creek vanished 2 weeks back. My guess is they're being held there. Amelia felt her hands curl into fists. "Then we can't ride past." "We don't have to," said a voice behind them. They turned, rifles half raised. Tall figures stood between the junipers, his outline framed by the light. Long braids hung over his shoulders, and his face was painted with earth and ash. His eyes were steady, ageless. Boone lowered his rifle first. "Didn't hear you," he said. "I didn't want to be heard," the man replied. He stepped forward. Amelia took a step back instinctively, but Boone didn't move. Instead, he nodded. Tall Bear. The name settled like a stone. Amelia studied the newcomer. He moved like Boone did, quiet, confident. But there was something else in him. A weight. A stillness that came from knowing how close death always was in the wild. "You know him?" she asked. Boone gave a slight nod. "We've crossed paths." Tall Bear crouched beside the dirt map, studying it silently. "They have more guns than you have bullets," he said. "Then we don't miss," Boone answered. Tall Bear looked at Amelia. Not with judgment, not even curiosity, just the kind. of gaze that saw through to the marrow of a person. "You fight?" he asked. "Enough," she said. He nodded once. "Then fight quiet. Loud comes last." That night they moved like shadows. Boone led them around the ridge, using every sliver of moonlight to pick safe steps. Tall Bear scouted ahead, almost invisible among the rocks. Amelia followed, every sense heightened, heart pounding in her. Throat Dot as they approached the edge of the camp, they saw the prisoners, 4 of them, roped to posts, eyes vacant. 2 were children. 1 was a woman with bloodied hands. Amelia's chest tightened. Whatever doubt had lingered in her was gone now. These were not men that could be reasoned with. Boone held up his hand. 1 minute. That was all they had. Tall. Bear slinked away, circling toward the far side of camp. He would draw attention. Boone and Amelia would move in from the north. It was risky, but clean. No second chances. Boone crouched behind a crate of supplies, his rifle resting across his knees. Amelia pressed herself flat behind a tent flap, knife in one hand, pistol in the other. Her breathing slowed. Her limbs stopped shaking. The fear didn't vanish, but it became something sharper, something useful. A shout rang out. Then another. A distraction had begun. Gunfire exploded like thunder. Boone surged forward, dropping the first guard before the man even turned. Amelia dashed behind him, covering the right flank. A second man charged from the shadows, rifle raised. Amelia squeezed the trigger. He collapsed. Boone kicked open a cage door, dragging the prisoners out. One of the children cried. The woman stumbled, but he urged them onward with firm, gentle hands. Behind them, tents caught fire. Panic spread through the camp like disease. Amelia ducked a bullet, fired back. The recoil jolted her shoulder. Someone grabbed her from behind. She twisted, slammed her elbow into the man's gut, and drove her. Knife up beneath his ribs. He gurgled and dropped. It was chaos, the kind that blurred time, that smeared faces and sounds into a single endless moment of survival. Boone shouted something. Amelia couldn't hear it. A figure loomed in front of her, massive, wielding a club. She stumbled backward. The man raised the weapon. A blur moved between them. Tall Bear. The club never landed. The man collapsed with a choking cry, an arrow buried deep in his chest. Bear didn't speak. He simply looked at Amelia once, nodded, then turned to cover their retreat. They fled into the dark, prisoners in tow, flames chasing them up the hill. It wasn't clean. It wasn't precise. But it was enough. They didn't stop until morning. When the sun finally broke the ridge, the group huddled in a dry riverbed, hidden beneath scrub trees and brush. The rescued family cried, held each other, thanked Boone and Amelia with broken voices. Amelia sat apart, arms wrapped around her knees. Her hands shook now, not from fear, but from the weight of what she'd done, of what she'd survived. Boone sat beside her, silent. "I killed a man," she said softly. Boone didn't look at her. "He'd have killed you. I know. I still see his face. You'll see it for a while." The quiet stretched between them. Then she whispered, "Does it ever go away?" Boone turned, met her eyes. "No, but you learn to carry it without letting it break you." They sat there for a long time. By midday, the rescued family had left, guided to a nearby settlement by Tall Bear. He didn't say goodbye, didn't wait for thanks. He just vanished, the way spirits sometimes do. Amelia stood with Boone at the edge of a bluff, looking out over the land. Green rolled in patches now. The air felt different, cleaner, less heavy. The mountains were closer. She turned to Boone. "What happens now?" He adjusted the strap of his rifle. "We keep moving. Unless you want to stop." She thought about the pain, the fire, the blood on her hands. "No," she said. "I want to see what's out there." He nodded, almost smiling. As they mounted their horses, Amelia reached into her pack. She pulled out the last thing she'd kept from that first day, the rawhide strip that had once held the price tag. Around her neck, she held it up. Then she let it fall. It drifted to the dirt and lay there, lifeless. She didn't look back. They rode west. The sun behind them cast long shadows ahead, but they didn't shy from them. The wild stretched wide, uncertain and untamed. But for the first time in her life, Amelia didn't feel like something to be claimed. She felt free. They didn't speak much as they traveled, but they didn't need to. There was trust now. Not given, but earned. Not through words, but through the kind of silence that holds meaning. The kind of silence that has seen fire and come through the other side. Boone was not a hero. He didn't pretend to be. And Amelia was no longer a girl. On a platform. She was something harder. Sharper. She was her own. As the trail wound upward, the wind shifted, carrying with it the scent of pine and cold stone. Boone looked back once. Amelia followed his gaze. Nothing behind them but distance. Everything ahead was unknown. And that, she thought, was exactly how it should be. If this story spoke to something inside you about freedom, trust, and the strength to walk through fire, then stay with us. Like, comment, and subscribe to follow more stories born in the dust, tested in the wild, and carried by the strength of the human spirit.